Welcome, and we are absolutely delighted to have with us our guest, Aimee Johnson, who is the Chief Marketing Officer of the Zillow Group. I had her previously on the radio show with me where she was brilliant and looking for it again. Of course, joining me once again is my colleague and co-conspirator and esteemed professor, Raghu Iyengar, who is also the director of Wharton Customer Analytics. But let's get into talking about how Zillow has responded to the pandemic. And I'm going to start with asking Aimee a question just to familiarize our audience with you, Aimee. If you could give us a little bit of your background. Your background's quite extensive, so we're going to try to just, a little bit of your background and how long you've been in your current position at Zillow.
Sure, I'll start from today and work my way backwards. So I've been at Zillow now for 2.5 years. It's been an amazing 2.5 years. Before coming into Zillow, I was at Starbucks for 14 years, so quite a long time. And I did everything from my last stint there was running their loyalty program, launching mobile order and pay, standing up the personalization engine. And before that, I ran beverage and ran coffee and a couple other products. So brought consumables to life. I launched Via for the company. So very much in the innovation product space prior to being in the digital innovation space for Starbucks. Before that, I had 10 years at Campbell's, CPG. So general manager hat was on, launched V8 Splash way back when.
You're in Philadelphia, you were in Campbell's?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, great.
Beautiful. Yeah. I have lots of friends also that were at Wharton. So I lived in 11th and Spruce for quite a long time, and then down on 3rd and Spruce and 2nd and Delancey. So I was all over the city. And I do miss it. I can't wait to be able to fly again, to head back because the food is fantastic there. Then I was for 5 years, I was actually a computer programmer, SAS SQL programmer, and re-engineering person for Sallie Mae. So I'd like to say I was in tech for the first 5 years of my career, because when I popped out with a marketing degree and no internships, they were like, so how do you think you can be a marketer? I'm like, well, I could program. My family programs. And I was like, well, but why do I want to be in this tech thing? Like, you don't make money in tech. I'm going to CPG. And that was fascinating that it was upside down. So here I am again, now in tech, and I'm super excited about, it seems like I've gone a long way to get here, but all of my background has kind of gotten me ready to where I am today.
So it's interesting that you refer to Zillow as tech. I think of it that way as well. I'm not sure all of our audience would think of it, because you often think of internet company or hardware, but you are absolutely in tech. But what we want to pursue with you to start off with is get a good understanding of what's been the impact of this pandemic on the Zillow Group. We know people have been moving and a lot of transition that's been going on. So give us the highlights of what's been happening with that.
Sure. So do you want me I could talk about how it's affected the customer a little bit, and then I could go into like what we've done as a company. Would that be helpful?
That'd be great.
So
okay.
Let's start with actually your customers. That'd be a great place to start.
Okay. It has been fascinating. So if you think about the last 12 months and what we've seen, I think a lot of tech companies have been looking at how do they accelerate a lot of those digital interactions in order to actually have an interaction with customers, especially if you're in retail or other places. What has been fascinating is on average, 5 million homes are bought and sold a year. And in the last year, clearly they were shrunk, right? There was nothing on the market. I think there were about 1 million homes that ended up being sold last year, which is crazy, right? And so you think about there's people that maybe want to move, but there's no homes. So what do I do with that? Well, we wanted to be there to be like, well, you can still look, you can still kind of narrow down what you want. You can still kind of figure out what it is you want to be in when this whole thing is over. So it's I think you saw the Saturday Night Live skit, Zillow surfing. It's a thing that makes people happy. Let's just go there. But we had our for sale listings on Zillow surge more than 50% higher than 2019 during the early months of the pandemic. We had a 27% increase year over year over our traffic. At one point, we had over 200 million average monthly unique users. Wow. That was an increase of 16% year over year. So there was a lot of engagement around things. We had a total, if you think of our total visits, we had upwards of 10 billion visits for the first year, for the full year of 2020, which is up 20%. So it's a lot of people wanted to engage with what could be next for them, even though they could not go anywhere. And they wanted to see how do they use the stuff differently. So we stood up 3D tours because we wanted to see how, like, they want to see the home. They can't get in the home. So this way they can actually see it. So how do we think about, wow, you want to dream about something, you want to think about something, but you can't actually be there. So how do we unlock that for you? How do we think about how we could be there for the customer, even if the customer can't be there in person? And the other thing that was so I want to see what I want. I want to think about how I want to get there. And the issue was no homes for sale. The listing to pending was just 18 days in mid-January, compared to 46 days at the same time last year. So, I mean, things are going quick too. So you have to make fast decisions. So when all that stuff's coming together, it causes a lot of stress and angst, as you can imagine, right, with customers. That's kind of the space that we've been sitting in for the past year.
Oh, I think that's incredible. I mean, again, also, indeed, I've been doing a lot of Zillow surfing myself, even though I'm not in the market. I think it's just interesting to go there and see what's going on.
Yeah.
And in terms of how you were communicating all of this to the customer, would love to know, what kinds of, especially in the last year, did you start communicating differently? Did you start communicating in a, I think one of the big things that has opened up in the last year or so is how brands can be more authentic. Kind of what exactly are they giving value proposition to the customer? Would love to hear all the changes that happened.
Yeah, I think, probably most people listening to this have seen the curve of like, what are we doing? I kind of equated the beginning to, you're just falling downhill and you're trying to figure out what to grab onto. And it's like mushy ground and you're just grabbing. And you finally hit we finally, with the pandemic, hit like that floor where it's like, okay, I'm on a ledge. It could be deeper, I'm not sure, but I see a way up. And you start figuring out how to get back up, right? So there's different places of where we were and how we managed through it. So in the falling phase, it is clearly like, where are people? Are my employees okay? Will they be okay? How do we all survive this together, right? So that was really the first. Then it was like, okay, wait, we have spending that we have on a bunch of different things in order to keep the employees where we want and have a future. How do we manage the spending? So you think about that. And then it's like, if we're going to spend, how do we make sure we are as impactful and as authentic as possible to show up? And I truly believe this, and I believe this with my current company as well as with Starbucks. Like, it's just authentically, we are here to help. Like, Zillow was created because a marketplace is fair and you should know the information. So then how do we show up authentic? And that's how we came up with our first ads. So we decided, you know what, we have lots of people going to our site, kind of interested because they're stuck at home. So I don't have to sell you performance. I don't have, but we want to show how we're there for you. We want to be a brand that says, like, we understand. So we did reshoot several different times, several different ads that we did play at different points in time. The first of which was like, we know the value of home. And we literally shot the ad with a director in his own house where he set the cameras up, and the whole thing was done quite uniquely. It was all COVID safe and all that kind of stuff. And it was emotional because that's what people were feeling and thinking. And then moving into the next is like, now we're feeling, hey, people are climbing up. It's not just us, it's others. We're figuring how to get out of this, right? We got our checks. It's then it was more about like, hey, look at all these different, then our shift was, look at all the possibilities you have for yourself. Like, look at all these different homes. Visualize yourself in a different place. Think about what you want to do. And now as we're coming out to it, it's more like action oriented. Okay, now you can. Now it's starting to open up a bit. So it's the storytelling we're doing with really listening to where the customer is and not saying stories we want because we need them to do something. It's telling stories because that's where they are. So then how do we help them where they are? And how do we tell them how to interact with us as a brand so they can advance and move forward in their, in their life? And at the same time, it was a bit fortuitous, I guess. We changed our mission statement because we're like, wait, we achieved our mission. We are the marketplace. So you can't sit in a mission that already exists. That's not inspirational to be steady in the present. What do we want the future to be? So we changed it to unlocking life's next chapter. And that literally, we launched right before the pandemic. So everything was coming together like as a company. But I will say the first thing we do is just need to make sure the employees are safe. And then from that, the customers.
Wow. So I can relate so much to what it is you just got done talking about because I've been in the market for a house Actually, I just bought a house and now I'm in the market
Oh,
to sell a
congratulations.
house.
Yeah.
And so I'm real curious about how you have, I mean, part of what ended up happening and you were describing is suddenly everything closed down. So there weren't any open houses.
Right.
And yet I'm sort of curious, sort of operationally, what it is you needed to do in order to provide those 3D tours. You didn't have your production crew going in and taking those. You had individuals that sort of describe that for us and how you went about, trying to implement all of that.
Sure. It's so funny. If I like literally, if I could reach over this little Holly Hobbit like kind of desk I put together, I have a box, and the box is sitting over here, and the box is something that we sent to photographers and agents. So if you think about, you can leave your house and feel safe, and there was all the safety around it at the time, right? Mask, everybody's spraying everything down at the time this was happening. But we created tools, and the innovation was in not that Zillow has to do it. It's like, how do we have the photographer? So as you know, you sold your house, right? Usually there is an agent comes, and the agent has their photographer, and they do beautiful shots of your beautiful home. Be it the agent or the photographer, give them the tools to actually do the 3D of your house and then upload it into your account. So it's not Zillow doing it. It's like, how can we give you the capability to showcase your house as best possible to help you sell it? So if we think about it through your eyes, it's like, what can I give you that you can post that makes somebody want to see it and put an offer in on it? So we tried to make it as turnkey as possible. And at first we started, like iOS is having new capabilities, right? Every time they launch something. While good and maybe phase one, it wasn't to the status that maybe you as a seller wanted to see your house. You wanted to see CRISPR and other things. So then the question is what are the tools? Okay, we need this type of camera. Okay, well, how do we make you flow through it? Oh, wait, we can't just make you flow through it. You probably want floor plans too. So it's thinking to the crispness, it's thinking to the display, it's thinking to the usage. And then we worked that came to market so quickly. And because of COVID, we were able to unlock that innovation.
Oh, thank you, Aimee. I mean, I think when you said, the customer journey and all of that, and thinking from the point of view, I mean, that's what marketing is all about. So I think that's wonderful to hear. I think kind of related to this point, as you were last year to now, as a lot more people are, as you mentioned, kind of at Zillow surfing, coming onto the website, checking out different things. Obviously, there's a huge amount of data being generated from the point of view of Zillow. Would love to hear again, what were some of the things, especially the creatives, as you mentioned, were there other things that you were using that data for to kind of say, what are people looking at? What's bubbling up in one part of the US, perhaps, what's not? Would love to hear all the other things that were going on.
Sure, we have a ton of first-party data. We also have these fantastic economists that we've been working with since our inception, and we put out every year homes reports, and we actually have something where I could send you after, which is the 2020 year in review.
Ah, wonderful.
And we actually said, here's what happened this last year. Here's how it looks differently. So the first thing is just always like, what is going on in the marketplace? Where are people? And it's buying, selling, renting, financing. So it runs the gambit of the who you are and what you're looking for. The second thing is we have stood up you could say now there's different forms of engagement, right? There's different forms of dreaming. Even within dreaming, it's dreaming with intent to buy, or it's dreaming with intent to dream. Or it's dreaming with intent to be nosy because your next door neighbor's house might be for sale and you're not sure what to do, right? So part of this is understanding how you're interacting with us and then creating that relationship with you, regardless of, are you ready to hit I'm gonna buy something button? So the thing that's been interesting for me, moving from a daily transaction at Starbucks, and it's a consumable transaction. So you can have one again the next day, or the next hour, or like I can have multiple cups of coffee. Come on back. It's not going to be like, so buy another house tomorrow. So the buying cycle is much different. But what you clearly see is there's reasons to interact with a customer much more often than there may be to purchase the thing. And the things we're looking at now with the data we have is, where are some of those places we can show up and interact in a positive way where eventually you'll see us in your line of path for things you need to buy. But if you're only pulsing in when they need you, then you're not really showing up as a partner. So some of the things we're looking at is like, what does engagement mean?
Yeah.
And what is my strategic customer? And there may be different strategic customers depending on where they are in their journey. So we're really starting to look at that. I mean, we've looked at it always. We've always had personas, but it's like double clicking into a lot of those to really see where's the customer and how do I have a conversation with them. It is fascinating though, too. It brings up, and I'm sure your listeners and you guys have thought about, like, when you have 3 different email addresses and everybody's talking about a single source of identity, right? I have to know who David is. You know, I have to know who you are. And however, if you think of Zillow, you can use Zillow different ways. If you are if you're at Spencer Stewart, which is a recruiting company, you may be using Zillow with your Spencer Stewart email address because I want to find Raghu. I want to find you a great. When I'm going to get you a new job, I'm going to make sure you get paid, right? So they use Zillow to see what. That same person may use their own personal account to see what their house is worth, and they may use another account because they're looking to buy something for their kids. Now, if I create a single source of identity, and I don't know that's what you're doing, personalization's a mess. Yeah. Because now I'm giraffe-loping 3 different things. So you really have to understand what you're trying to achieve and how the data is flowing through the journey to know whether or not you're looking at a person as an individual or not. So that's some of the stuff that we're really spending a lot of time on right now.
No, that's fascinating to hear that. I'm sort of curious, you know, your relationship with realtors, because it's people that are looking to buy a house or are trying to, you know, often contact a realtor. Certainly if you're selling a house, you often contact a realtor. So what is your relationship with realtors and how has that changed during this period? Or has it changed at all?
You know, realtors exist because humans need other humans to talk to, right? Like I have a realtor. I just bought my house. I love my realtor. When I bought this house, she's fantastic. It's like you can't digitize everything, and we understand that. So a lot of what we've been talking about is, I don't know, I keep calling it the zipper. It's the zipper, right? We have information. There are humans and people that we work for directly and work with as partnerships. You have to zipper all those pieces together so the customer's getting what they want. Yeah. Right. When you're nervous, I was sitting in front of a customer. We were doing some ethnographic work about 2 years ago. 2 years, sitting down, having a conversation, and she starts crying. Let's call her Cindy. She's a mom. We're in her house, very cluttered. You could very much tell that she needs to move, and I understand. I'm empathetic. And about an hour and a half in, she starts crying. And she's just like, I just can't tell my husband that we can't get a house not in this school district. And we may have to live here because of that, but I can't live in the house anymore. So it was very clear, like she's having a moment. And you know, the real estate agent was sitting there and they were counseling her. And there's something to a human with another human there that understands what you're going through. And you know what was brilliant about that is that real estate agent moved her through it. And she's like, it's going to be okay. We're going to find it together. And here's how we're going to do it. So I fundamentally believe that the two have to live together. I also believe the agent has to understand the data and has to understand where the customer is and has to have things quickly at their fingertips in order to satisfy that customer. So that's why I think the two work really well together.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. So Aimee, how far would you want to, like, I'll give you an example. So we were having a conversation with Raj Berry, who's a Wharton alum, and he's at Uber Global. And he said, well, Uber, it's, you know, they're thinking about Uber Eats. They then start thinking about how can they do next hour delivery. So how far is, like, for example, Dave just bought a house. He probably wants somebody to come and check on the house and say, well, oh, this tap is not working. Is Zillow going to get it? Like, how far do you want to kind of go through that journey?
Yeah, it's fascinating working with a company of inventors, I will tell you, because there's always opportunity around every door. We are really looking at, there's a bunch of challenges in that, right? There's the vision of where we want to take the company. There's you have to be close enough into your pieces of innovation so you could take Zillow brand from being search and find, which is what we are, to what? So if you do too many different things, all of a sudden we're not known as anything. So some of it's like, what are we going to stand in and for, and kind of like clusters of activities, if you will, so you can communicate it. And then there's places where you want to stand that you're really adding value, right? And that the brand deserves to be in that place. So when you think about that, we're thinking of Zillow is known for search and find and of homes. So what is the next knock-on thing that we could do that makes sense from a brand, as well as that we can activate, communicate? So one of those clearly is, if you can search and find for a home, we can buy and sell homes, right? So one of the things we're doing is in 23 different markets, we actually are buying and selling homes, and the Zestimate is actually the live offer price on your house.
Very interesting.
right? So another place where we're looking at what that could be is with mortgages, right, and refi. So we know the rates, we have economists, we have, so it's things like that we're looking at. Now we're also looking at the customer journeys for buyers, sellers, renters, and we're saying, okay, if these are the places we start, where might be the next place? I don't know that the next place we'd go is helping you find somebody with your faucet. However, because we have stood up buying and selling homes, we now also have renovation staffs.
I can imagine, yeah.
Right, who are buying and selling homes. So what if we were looking in those 23 markets? Now we have partners that also need business. What does that look like? So, and we create marketplaces. So what could that be? So it's not to say we will never. I think the question for us is always, it's almost like a rolling 2-year, what's the next thing we can do and communicate? And not spread ourselves too thin. Because if you think about, we're in probably 5 or 6 different industries. We're the first competitor. If you just add the ad spending, it's $1 billion, right? And I'd love to have $1 billion to spend on marketing, but I'm not going to. So we have to think about how do we be about efficient, make sure we have a point of difference, make sure that I could communicate Zillow effectively now into all these places, and know that customers could go to get what they need from us.
So I'm really curious about this, buying and selling houses that you're doing. And you had told me about that before when we were on the radio, but you've expanded the number of cities that you're doing it in. And it sort of relates to the previous question I asked you about with respect to your relationship with the realtors, because now you're sort of a competitor with them as well. And so I'm curious how that has changed your relationship, if at all.
I think as we're looking to going more down funnel, and we have unlock life's next chapters, and we want to help you move forward, and we have a vision how the brand wants to show up. As we're closer to the actual transaction, so not just like, look here for a glorious home, we want to make sure that we're partnering with people that have the same outcomes in mind for the customers as we do. So in these marketplaces where we are doing Zillow offers, we do have tighter partnerships with a select group of realtors, because it is super important that we show up and they show up in a way that the customer is getting satisfied the way they are. And we are looking at different types of models in the marketplaces where potentially we can interact with the customer to give them even better customer service. But we are looking at, do the partners that we have the same outcomes? What does partnership there look like in order to achieve it? How far can you go with a third party to have the same KRs so that you're holding yourselves accountable? I equate it a little bit to like Starbucks' decision to have licensees or franchisees and how they decided who to do part. You can kind of, the closer in you are with an HMS host, for example, the more you could say that's acceptable or unacceptable. And the farther away you are, the least kind of control you have over the customer experience. So for us, it comes down to how much control do you want over the customer experience, and how do you then structure those partnerships to show up that way?
Makes sense.
Great point, Aimee. So Aimee, I think just looking internally as opposed to externally, I know I really like the way you put together, which is, at the end of the day, you have the information, but you also need somebody to quote unquote help the customer to close the deal. So what about internally, when you think about, the culture at Zillow, and the last year has been, people have mostly been digital through Zoom or other ways. And as you start hiring people, how do you kind of maintain that culture, and what have you been doing internally to kind of make sure that as people come into Zillow, and with all the data, I'm sure you're hiring as well, that they kind of understand what Zillow is about? And I'm sure they want face-to-face, at least know other people at Zillow, but perhaps it's hard.
Yeah, I think lots of companies are struggling with this. We decided as a company, and we're pretty bold about it, that about 90%, and I go back and check, I think about 90% of all of our employees have a decision on how they want to interact with us and how much they come into the office. So for example, we're redesigning our entire office space to be meaningful based on the new way that employees will be interacting with us. So it's not the same. We're not ever going to have everybody come back into the office again. We have 700, I think, employees that have relocated. And that about 200 of them have moved to a different state. And I would say almost 10 Zillow employees a week tell us they're relocating. Like, it's very much, so a couple of things about that is one is it's fantastic because you can imagine Seattle is Seattle, and Seattle is as diverse as Seattle is, but there's a lot more diversity around the United States. So one, from a hiring perspective, it's a fantastic unlock for us. Because if you think about, if we are supposed to be representative of households in America, do we see those households kind of sitting in our employee base? And you don't. So now we can. Now we have an opportunity to open that up for so many more people, right? The second part is even just thinking about interactions and how much interaction is wasteful versus not, and how then you have thinking time versus not, and the diversity of that. We've heard from folks that used to be the only ones that were virtual. They're like, wow, now I feel like I have an equal voice in the room. And you know what? Now we've set up hours, so it's 10 to 2. Those are core hours when you have multi-group meetings. And we've set those hours because, again, the respect for people moving around is like, now I know how to work my life around what I need to work my life around. If I have to drop my kids off and pick it up, I can feel free to do that. If I live in New York City and I'm working with Seattle, I still know it's 10 to 2, Pacific Coast time, but I could work around that. So it's, where can you be consistent with your way of work that grounds people in things that they don't need to be spending time on, right? Consistency in hours, consistency in way of work. How do you manage your meetings? Those kind of things. Now, all that said, people still want to see people. So how do you set that up? And you can only do so many virtual happy hours, so we are still in the process of figuring out what getting together looks like. And that's how we're thinking about our corporate headquarters and other things. So if everybody comes in once a quarter, then what does the space look like? What kind of interactions would we have? Should we be standing up houses to get customer experience in more places in the United States of the houses we buy? Should we be making those feel like they're like kind of mini sights and sounds for employees to go into and feel and look at? So we're still trying to figure it out. We know it's not going to be the way it was in the past, nor do we think it needs to be, frankly. But what is that future? How do we be flexible about it? How do we listen to our employees? How do we get that more diverse employee base in? I do try to tell people, if you know somebody in a zip code, I almost feel like I need a Yenta people in zip codes. I'd be like, okay, you don't know, you live a block away from you and you guys both just started. So I'm going to send you a little hello, introduce yourselves and go for a walk. So some of that stuff I think will be happening more and more as well.
That's great. It sounds like that Zillow has really seized upon this moment as an opportunity to sort of recreate itself and redesign the offices, for example. So I think that's absolutely wonderful. We're about out of time, and I want to ask you one last question. Aside from the fact of where do you get all your energy, which I think is just fantastic, and I hope the whole
just got sunny. The sun just came out. Seattle sun. I'm just all like,
it can't be Seattle. But the last question I want to ask you is, if you had one piece of advice for others in other companies, and what would that one piece of advice be for sort of how to manage through change?
I'm the queen of commas. You just asked me for one thing. I can't do it. I'll make one big run-on sentence. I think one of the things I've learned is when you're making decisions, you have 2 empty chairs on either side of you. One empty chair is for the employee and one empty chair is for the customer. And so every decision you're making has to take both into consideration. And if you do that, then your business will grow and you'll do right by both your customer and your employee. So it's just like if you're, and especially when you're stressed out and can't breathe, take a breath and just imagine 2 empty chairs and then have conversations with them. Empty chairs.
See, you were able to do it, and you did it really, really well. So, absolutely wonderful, Aimee. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll look forward to our next conversation. So
great, thanks for having me. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Aimee. Take care. Bye-bye.